When I started this project, I originally intended for it to be simply a restoration of a breastplate, but over the months it turned into a full armor build, at least the top half that is, and this became my own battle-ready Dragon Knight armor, inspired by things like Elden Ring, Darksouls, hell, even House of the Dragon Knight of the Seven Kingdoms in more recent memory. It now sits as the most singular, expensive project that I've ever embarked on thus far. This is how it started. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested. I am your host Tyrant, and in today's episode we have a little bit of an out of the ordinary project for you guys, and that is working on a breastplate, specifically seeing if we can restore it. Now on the channel we've tested a lot of different types of armor and we've broken a lot of different types of armor. In today's episode I want to do the opposite. I actually want to fix some armor because I want to see if I can not only get this armor to fit me, but also seeing if we can use it as reference and things like that. So this particular breastplate here is actually one you might have seen before, but before we get to that, let's talk about how I got it. So I got this particular breastplate in a little bit of a horse trade. He got a custom sword that I worked on, and I got this completely destroyed breastplate, but I can't be too mad about it because obviously I was actually the one who imparted all of this damage onto the breastplate, and that's where you might have seen it before. Obviously, whenever I'm talking about things, I'm referencing things in episodes, I will give you guys a reference clip to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. And more often than not, specifically if it's about armor, it'll be a clip of this bad boy, specifically me smashing this breastplate. So what we're going to be doing is the opposite in today's episode. Let's see if we can actually fix this thing. Now, I don't have any experience in this, but what I'm going to start by doing is taking this over to the anvil and just hitting it with a hammer. Kind of what I did to destroy it, but hopefully this time it'll fix it. Let's get started. So when it came to working on the breastplate, the first thing I did was obviously throw it on the anvil and start hammering away. So my game plan originally was just simply, trying to restore the shape as much as humanly possible, try and obviously deal with the larger cavities and the larger problems first before moving on to anything else. I was able to get obviously these segments down here articulating again, which is really important, and I was able to, I think, get some clean curves and clean transitions along the top of the chest. So we've got that structure back, we've got that armor angling back, which is really, really important obviously, because that is what provides protection through either its geometry or its thickness, etc., etc. So I think we've restored a lot of the curves quite nicely. I'm quite happy how it transitions from obviously down to the stomach to the chest, and obviously from the chest down to the ribs. It all kind of curves and looks good, so I'm happy with that, while also at the same time obviously now fitting me. I've done the meme, I've done the breastplate stretcher meme. It now has been stretched a little bit and it fits me, because obviously this was originally created for somebody much smaller and shorter than myself, which means that did create some issues. Obviously we have this gap here that has opened up because we've stretched it kind of, so that will need to be filled in, of course. Now when it comes to working on armor like this, obviously it would be far better to take all the rivets out and then work on each piece individually. I'm not doing that in the slightest. I'm just going to work on this big giant breastplate as one singular piece and go from there. So after a lot of hammering, I was able to restore most of the shape. I was even able to get a lot of the curves back, which I'm incredibly happy about. There is one slight issue, and that is obviously if we look down this center line, it is slightly warped. I think this just came in from, obviously some of those larger pieces of damage on the breastplate actually warped it. And so actually restoring the center line to be perfectly straight again has been a little bit tricky, I must admit. Next up, issues was obviously because, like I said, it was made for somebody smaller, the arms come in just a little bit too much for me to be comfortable with, and the neck also doesn't really extend to where I would want it to be. So I'm probably going to create some nice rondels to fill in these gaps, and a nice generous large gorget to come down to protect the neck and obviously extend onto the plate a little bit more. Then we can throw on our pauldrons and we should have good coverage on around the chest and neck area. Obviously this helmet, Ned's helmet, I'm just sitting this on there for now. It's not obviously going to stay there. It's just, this is kind of how it looks at the moment. And then last but not least, I do think we'll add some tassets down here because this breastplate is a little bit short as well. It doesn't come up to where I want it to. I want some extra protection to extend down towards the legs a little bit more. So some tassets on either side I think is a good addition. So that's the game plan. That's what I think we need to do next. But in terms of how we were able to get obviously the curves and the shape back to the breastplate, I'm quite happy with how it is so far. I'm quite happy with how it has turned out at the moment. There is obviously a lot of that battle damage, a lot of that the damage is taken from all of the testing. In my opinion, this is the proofing, right? This breastplate can handle all of these things. So I'm not going to remove any of it simply because I was the one who did most of the damage. And obviously I think it adds to the look somewhat. But that is the game plan. I'm quite happy with where we've gotten it. I think it fits now somewhat reasonably. I think we can make it fit even better. A lot of the shapes and a lot of the curves have been restored, and I don't really think that we're going to be able to get any better than this, really. In terms of the center line, I don't think I'm going to be able to fix it any further. It's just the way that the plates have been hit in such a way from the damage. It's just warped that I can't bring it back any further than this, I don't think. At least with my skills, that is. However, that's the next game plan. So we've gotten the breastplate kind of back into a reasonable shape and it can be worn, etc., etc. We need to fill in this gap, put some tassets, rondels, gorget. Let's get to it. So with the breastplate finally in somewhat of an acceptable condition, we can actually start putting pieces together and building things. The first thing that I wanted to do was actually extend the breastplate. Like I said a little bit earlier, this breastplate was not actually created for someone my size. Now, because we have modified it, it does now fit me, but it's still a little bit short. So the first thing is cutting out a new piece of steel that I can then shape and attach to the breastplate just to extend it that little bit extra. So what I'm using is the exact same steel as the original breastplate. I laid out my template, my design, cut it out with the angle grinder. So now that this piece of steel is actually shaped the correct way, I did do a little bit of heat tempering because I'll talk about finishes of the armor a little bit later, but essentially I just wanted to see how it would look. Then after that, I drilled some holes in the armor so that I could attach this new segment. Fits like a glove and looks like it was always meant to be there. Can't ask for anything better than that, honestly. Then I needed to actually finish up restoring the breastplate, right? Essentially what I wanted to do was weld in some of the holes from, some of the damage that it actually bust through when I was testing it. So we're gonna fix that up. I'm just welding it enough so that obviously it has that structural integrity and it still provides protection, but not so much that we're completely removing all of the history of this breastplate like I mentioned earlier. I still want all of those battle scars from the testing previously, but a little bit of welding just to fill in some of the larger holes and gaps. Now it is on to building our first piece from scratch, and these are some tassets. These are the parts of armor that extend from the breastplate near your belly down onto your legs. There are lots of different ways that you could, kind of create tassets. You could have ones that just kind of hang off the breastplate, which is what I'm going to be going with, or you can have ones that extend so far down they essentially just become leg armor after a certain point. We're going to have tassets that hang down from the breastplate. The design that I'm going with for everything obviously is very fantasy, very gothic, very Elden Ring, all of those sorts of things mashed together. Very dragon, I guess. Yeah, dragon. I guess that's a good way to describe it. But essentially that's the design that I came up with. After I've cut out those pieces of steel, I then obviously use the angle grinder to take off any of those sharp edges. Now, there are going to be steps that will be missing from obviously this build. This was a very, very large project that took a long time, and a lot of the steps kind of repeat, right? So I tried to include certain steps in each segment of armor. For example, when we're adding in things like fluting or different raised bits of the armor, you guys don't want to see me do the exact same operation over and over again, so I tried to just include it in one segment. I should mention at this point I had about 3 to 4 pieces of armor, and I did a quick test fit, seeing how the breastplate, the tassets, my shoulders that I already had, how they all kind of fit together and how they're looking. I did get some, mail. So before I removed all of the surface finish, I did do a very quick fit up just to see obviously how things are going, because as this project is progressing, keep in mind you're watching this video all at once. This is like, a big long video, but for me, this has been months in the making. I'm not working on this constantly. It's, doing bit by bit. So doing lots of test fits to make sure everything fits together nicely and feels good as well is really important. So after these pieces were pretty much finished, I needed to actually get off all of the mill scale, how all the different pieces that I'm kind of creating and putting together do not match at all. Now again, I don't need them to match perfectly. I want it to look lived in. I want it to look real. I want it to look, battle worn and tested, those sorts of things. So I'm not going for perfection. I think that's important to mention, of course, but at the same time, I do want everything to generally match and look like it should go with one another, which means getting a consistent surface finish on all of the pieces of armor. So there's essentially 3 options that I was considering for finishing the armor. Now I'll talk a little bit more in depth which one I went with and why, but for now, essentially all you guys need to know is I needed to remove all of the mill scale from all of the pieces of steel. Essentially the mill scale is when you buy these pieces of steel, in their raw form, they have a surface finish on them that stops them from rusting, which is great, right? I actually don't mind how it looks, but if I want to finish the armor in some specific way, let's say I want to polish it or I want to apply something to it, I need to remove this mill scale. The best way to do this that I have found personally is to use white vinegar. So I filled up a full tub of white vinegar and just chucked all the pieces of steel that had the mill scale finish on them and left them in there for like 2 days. Now, this is really good for removing obviously mill scale, and it's really good for removing rust, which you guys would have seen me do in previous episodes. White vinegar is really kind of the go-to to remove things from steel that you don't really want. And it's not dangerous compared to some other chemicals and that sort of stuff. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. After I had removed all of the mill scale, I wanted to obviously sand everything back, get it to somewhat of a consistent surface finish on all of the pieces. And this is where we get to the part where I essentially had to decide what finish I wanted my armor to have. And there was a couple of different options. There was 3 to be specific. The first one is I could just polish everything, right? We could take off all of the surface finishes and give it a nice satin, kind of high polish finish, which looks really nice, a knight in shining armor. But it just isn't really my vibe, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know. So then the other one was, well, I could do gun bluing, right? Gun bluing is you essentially apply a chemical to the surface and it will, oxidize it and turn it to a nice, depending on which one you buy, sometimes a really black finish or sometimes kind of like a dark navy blue finish. Either way, I think they're both, they're great, right? If you're enjoying today's episode, you really should consider subscribing. It helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. But again, I wanted something a little bit more special, and so I decided to go the route of heat tempering. Now, when you temper steel, when you heat it up, it actually goes through certain color changes, and depending on, the temperature, it will determine the color, and you can go all the way from, things like a golden straw color, a blue, a purple, brown, all the way to, kind of getting into some darker shades if you burn it, right? But essentially you have a large color spectrum, and so I thought to myself, I'm going to heat temper my armor to give it kind of this very nice dark blue with golden straw and even some reds mixed in, and it will create a really nice, I would say, beautiful striking finish, especially in direct sunlight. So this was a long, arduous process. I no longer own, personally, a blowtorch. I really need to get a new one. I had one years ago, I no longer have it. So all I have is 2 little tiny hand torches that I did all of the heat tempering for this entire armor set on. Let me put it this way, it took a long time. And there was some drawbacks for it, right? It did allow me to concentrate that heat a lot more so I could get the colors to pop in specific areas, especially on things like the faceplate, which I'll show you guys a little bit later. But it was a long and arduous process because I didn't have, as much heat as I wanted, where if I had a bigger blowtorch, I could do this a lot quicker and it would also be a little bit more consistent. So this was just a limitation because I didn't buy a blowtorch. And by the time of the end of the project, it's it's already done. But as you can see from, some of the heat tempering on the breastplate, it looks gorgeous, and that's all in artificial lighting. You'll see how beautiful it looks, obviously in natural lighting a little bit later. But I was really happy with this particular finish, and so I was all in on it. Let's put it on every piece of armor. Next up that I wanted to work on was these mittens. I purchased these combat grade mittens, and they were perfectly functional, as in obviously they work, right? They just obviously do not match any of the aesthetic that I'm going for, and I find them quite ugly, right? So I decided to completely modify them. This was not really that fun, if I'm being completely honest with you. Mittens and hand protection and gloves and that sort of stuff is really complex. It's actually it's a weird niche that if you know, especially when it comes to like sparring equipment, how complicated, expensive, and how many failed attempts there has been at different, types of hand protection, because obviously our hands, we have thumbs, we have a whole bunch of joints in there that you need to protect from different angles, different strike. Anyway, it's a whole thing. They're very complex, essentially. But I decided to go with more of a mitten, crab claw type design rather than articulated fingers, specifically because I just couldn't find any that I liked, and they're obviously a lot more complex. So the first thing that I needed to do was, tear out all of the rivets and disassemble the mittens into all their individual pieces. And again, there's a lot of pieces, and these are just mittens, not even articulated fingers. A lot of small little pieces. And then I started to modify each piece individually. Now, this particular technique that you're seeing me do here is a very, I would say, basic and bastardized way of doing this technique. This is technically kind of what you should do, right? If you want to add raised sections or fluting or any of that sort of stuff into armor, you are essentially in concept going to be doing the same thing, right? You'll have like kind of a divot, you'll have a tool, you put your steel in between, and you will, create your lines, create your armor angling, your fluting, whatever it is, right? This is just a very, very basic, terrible version of it. Proper armorers will obviously do this much better with much better tools and much nicer results. But for me, I'm essentially, creating those hard edges that I want in the pieces of armor individually. And then after that, we're going to heat temper each individual piece of the mittens so that we can get those nice colors coming through, of course. And at this point, this is where I essentially needed to create a leather harness to go inside the mittens, custom for this particular piece. So how this is going to work is I'll have leather gloves on, and then I will put the mittens over the top, and they will have that leather harness that goes over the top of my regular gloves. I kind of just created a design that I thought would work, of these weird shapes, kind of, I'm going to latch this bit over and then I'll rivet it together, and then that should give me the articulation I need. And creating this kind of, leather harness actually worked really well, especially for just kind of freehanding it, making it up as I was going along. I liked it so much that that was the design that I went with, and I mirrored it for obviously the left hand so we could have both mittens done. Okay, moving on to the next piece. This is the faceplate. One of the most important parts of the entire armor set is obviously the helmet. That sets the tone for everything. So let's talk a little bit about something that I wanted to bring up because this is important. Some of the costs involved when it actually came to putting this armor set together, some of the stuff that you're not seeing on camera simply because I didn't use it. And helmets are a good example, right? For example, this was the original helmet I purchased for this particular project, but when it arrived, it was not what the seller said it was. This is a LARP grade helm, and originally when I purchased it, it was supposed to be combat grade. It was supposed to be much thicker than this. This one cannot be used at all. So essentially I got like an 80% refund and got to keep it. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but I got to keep it anyway. This particular helm here, I love this helm. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, but it has no room for protection or padding or anything like that. It's not the thickest steel either, so I probably wouldn't fight in it. But the bigger problem is it just has no room for padding, so this one I also couldn't use. Then this was the design that I was originally going to go with. This is a Darksouls armor design. I got this custom faceplate made, and then I did a bunch of work to it, and I purchased originally another combat grade helm that you don't see here to go with this faceplate. I was going to put them together, but they just really looked terrible, so I didn't end up going that route. So again, there's more money wasted here. Then when it came to this particular helm, this helm here came with my custom faceplate that I got commissioned. Now the faceplate that I got commissioned is gorgeous, and that's what we used in the final project, but this particular helm that came with it, I just didn't like. I didn't like the design of it, I didn't like the shape of it, and I didn't like how long it was, things like that. So what I ended up doing was taking my custom faceplate that I got with this one that I commissioned, with the helm that I purchased for this particular faceplate, and put them together. The reason why I'm mentioning all of this is because there was a couple of extra pieces of armor that I ended up not using. That little ramble out of the way, let's talk about the custom faceplate. So when it arrived, there was a couple of small tweaks that I needed to make to it. I wanted to, fix up some of the curves and the contouring to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more angular to match, obviously, that design aesthetic of the other pieces of armor. And at the same time, I needed to design some new hinges so that I could actually attach it to the helm that I wanted to. Making hinges sucks. I did not enjoy this at all. It was not fun. I hope that I never have to make hinges again. They're just annoying little pieces. Anyway, I designed these custom little hinges that had nice curves and angles to them. Cut them out, drilled them, bent them over, got everything nice and fitting together quite well, and attached it to the helm that we are going with. Now, the eye slit on this particular faceplate is interesting because I don't necessarily think it's the worst. I would personally have preferred it to be a little bit thinner. Obviously, you want to reduce as much chance of anything getting through your faceplate as possible, but at the same time, I don't think it's the worst, right? I think it's acceptable. But because I am actually going to be fighting in this, and I do have projects and other things planned with this particular armor set and things like that, I do want to take no chances. So I decided to use one of the old fencing masts, cut out a small strip that I'm going to attach on the inside of the faceplate just as an extra layer of protection, just in case anything gets close to those particular eye slits. So now that we have the hinge done, we have the faceplate done, we need to heat temper the faceplate. Now on the faceplate, I decided to make the heat tempering a lot more, I would say, colorful. On most of the armor pieces, I've kind of gone for some of those darker hues and tones, but on the faceplate itself, I wanted those colors to pop, especially out in the sun. This is one of those cases where having that direct, intense heat exactly where I want it did help. Obviously, it takes a longer time, but I'm really happy with how the heat tempering came out, specifically on the faceplate itself. Now, when it comes to the helm, I technically could have just left it like this, right? Finish it off, give it a heat temper, and we're good to go. But I had to make things difficult for myself, and I wanted to make sure that all of these design aesthetics and languages match just a little bit better. So I decided to add some, I would say, fake fluting to the top of the helm. Now, obviously, when you add in fluting or different types of, raised, embossed sections, whatever it is to armor, you do this when you're building the armor. But because this is a battle-ready helm that I just purchased, right, I obviously can't do that at this point. So what I'm going to be attempting, I say attempt because the results are mixed. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I'm going to be essentially welding onto the helm these steel round bars, these little tiny ones, and then grind them back to shape them. So the first thing that we need to do is actually bend them into a shape that obviously matches that of the top of the helm. For this, I just use my vise and I just go very slightly, making slight adjustments, and after a little while you have a nice curve. Match this to the helm perfectly, and I started welding, a bunch of welding. This took a long time. I probably could have spent an extra 3-4 hours on this, filling in every single little tiny gap and making a lot of these kind of raised sections look a little bit better in the end. However, I was grinding so much on the helm, I was starting to get worried that at some point I'm just going to grind back all of the thickness and it's no longer going to be strong enough to be considered combat grade, right? So I kind of erred on the side of caution, where I continuously ground back until I got to a point where I'm like, okay, no more of this. I'm comfortable with this. It doesn't look perfect, but I'm happy because it's still functional. But when it came to heat tempering the helmet, because it's so heavy and it's so thick, I actually couldn't get my two little tiny, blow torches to actually heat temper it. It's just too big, right? Too much surface area, which is funny considering we did the full breastplate. So to fix this particular issue, I decided to just throw it into an open flame, and this essentially got the job done. Now it is a lot darker than a lot of the other armor pieces. I can't really see the temperature control because I did it at night, but what I did to remedy this is, obviously because we have such a vibrant faceplate, I did sand back some of the top of the helm and then heat tempered that a little bit more precisely so that they kind of transition into each other before it goes into a gradient of the darker colors on the actual helm itself. And with that being said, that is pretty much most of the pieces of armor. There are obviously some things that I, ordered individually, like obviously the mail, the full hauberk, things like that. But we'll get into that when we start putting it on. For the most part, that is the build. There's obviously a lot of stuff that I left out here. I'm trying to give you guys kind of, the overview of this generally speaking, but those are kind of like, the high points. All right, with that being said, let's get out there and let's finally put it on. So here is our finished armor, and I am about to put it on. But before we do, there's a couple of caveats and things that I wanted to talk to you guys about as we put it on. So there's a lot of reasons why I went and did things in the specific ways that I have. One of my philosophies is trying to create an armor set that can be broken into pieces and then used again for different, whatever I need it, right? So I went for a full hauberk, obviously, mail all around, because we have a breastplate, we don't have a full cuirass. So like I said, there's a lot of caveats in here for why I'm choosing to go with each individual piece. So this is the armor set as it currently stands, but I have my beautiful custom Dragon Whisperer blade here. I thought this would be the perfect sword to bring out for this particular application. I've got my helmet here. I'm going to throw this on a little bit later after I've done, rambling essentially, because this is quite heavy. This is 4 kilos. I weighed this, and just the helm alone is 4 kilos, but I am so happy with how beautiful this thing, oh, look at that color. And then obviously we have the breastplate. I like the color on it as well. So let's talk about leg armor and why I specifically chose not to have any, at least at the moment. Obviously, this is a work in progress project. This has been a lot of months that I've kind of just been working on it when I had time. I literally got this last year, like I started this last year, and it has cost me quite a lot of money. We'll get into the expenses a little bit later. I haven't really done anything with the legs. I just didn't have time. I'm getting into winter, so I really wanted to get this particular project, finished right. And at the same time, I tried to get some stuff just so that I could for today's episode, but there was issues with it, just like there was with the helmets, so that didn't end up happening. I didn't think my samurai, greaves really would suit this particular armor set, so I didn't want to bring them, and I didn't think my sparring ones would work either. So legs are kind of what needs to be done next in terms of this particular project. But again, I'm going to work on that at some other point in time. Obviously, I can still work on it past this point, and I will, but for now, let's just, film the rest of the episode. Now, obviously, I am not a historical channel in the slightest. I am a fantasy, and this is my, Darksouls kit. It is battle ready, like I can fight in this, but generally speaking, there's nothing really historical about a lot of this. This is more of my, dragon type armor. That's how I describe it. Maybe with a little bit of gothic influence, of course, but generally speaking, it is my custom fantasy design. Like, this is what, if I was in a Dark Souls game, this is how I should be looking, 100%. So, if they can incorporate me into the next, Elden Ring or something, I would not complain at all. All right, first test that we need to do is mobility. I'm sorry if the audio is going to be all f***ed up, because obviously it's right here and it's on my steel plates, right? There's nothing I can do about it, guys. But let's start off with a long sword first. We've got our Dragon Whisperer here, my favorite sword, obviously. Not the most mobile, but not terrible either. I probably need to put the helmet on to really get a good feel for that, honestly. While I can, let's see if we can fire a bow in the armor. Not really the best kind of arm raising capabilities, but still able to at least hit a target. I know it's not very far away, but a bow is still 100% viable. Low poundage bow. Okay, if you gave me a war bow, I can't get the articulation isn't the best. In terms of how much this weighs, so all of these pieces of armor come in at around about 35 to 36 kilos, which I believe is around about 70 to 80 pounds in freedom units, right? So it's pretty reasonable. You know, obviously we're using thicker bits of steel, that we're using that full hauberk, right? Like I mentioned earlier. And then obviously the helmet itself is like, you know, 4 kilos in and of itself. But yeah, that's kind of what the weight is at this moment, which isn't terrible. It's not unwieldable. I've been able to obviously, you know, be out in the armor for hours at a time, no problem at all. Because I got my hauberk, right? Usually there's a little bit of context and caveats here, because you can obviously get a looser fit or a tighter fit. If you go for a looser fit, it obviously means you have more links and chains, and it means that it does, at least in my experience, it feels heavier. This is a really snug fit in terms of the mail, so it feels really good on my body. It has a great weight distribution. However, it means that it's essentially a bitch to get into. I can't get into this mail by myself. I actually need someone to help me. And then obviously once we attach all the plates to everything else, the weight is not terrible at all. It's actually something that I've spent probably a good 4 or 5 hours in this, no breaks, and it's been like fine, right? I really haven't noticed it at all. So I'm very happy with how it fits as well. That's a really important thing. Obviously this breastplate was made for somebody smaller. Now I've obviously stretched it out, done the meme, breastplate stretcher, but at the same time it is a little short and it does come down a bit more than I would want actually. Now in terms of other armor pieces, like I mentioned, we've obviously got to do the legs, we've got to do, you know, sabatons, we've got to do a whole bunch of stuff down there, but for now I'm happy with this. So in terms of final costs, it was kind of a beefy one. This is the most expensive YouTube episode that I have ever done, honestly. We are around about $2,000 into this particular project. Now, like I said, there was a little bit of wastage because, you know, there's a couple of pieces that I bought that I didn't end up using, but that accounts for maybe $400 or $500. So 1,500 on actually everything that you're seeing here. Now keep in mind, does not include man hours at all. Obviously this is, you know, I would say at least a couple of weeks of work. So if you're paying somebody a salary, then obviously that is like, that's more than the material costs and obviously the piece costs. So once you factor in the man hours and the raw material costs, it's absolutely insane. And that's not even including obviously coming out here to film this, you know, the travel costs, and then obviously the editing time, all that sort of shit. So it is a huge investment for this sort of project, which I don't know if I'm going to financially recover from. So if you guys want to support the channel, I would truly appreciate it. And obviously the new merch design based on this is really awesome. But Patreon is really the better way to do it. So this is the design for today's episode that I did. I designed it as kind of like, you know, a comic book cover. We have a double-sided print, of course, and down the bottom we have the slogan, robust in the thrust, because you always want your sword to be robust in the thrust, essentially. But if you want to pick one of these up and help support the channel and help recoup some of the financial costs of today's episode, I'd truly appreciate it. Links are down below. All right, let's get back to it. In terms of its heat dispersion, today's been quite a cool and cold day, and I've been kept at around room temperature. I've been doing full sprints, I've been doing, you know, cutting, a bit of testing, firing the bow. I've just been trying to do a bunch of random shit, essentially, and I feel way better than even I usually do in just like my regular gambeson and that sort of kit. So in terms of the heat, it's not unmanageable. I can still move, and to be fair, I'm actually filming another episode in this armor directly after I finish, you know, this one. So I've still got like another 2 hours to go, and I expect it to be perfectly fine as well. I'll probably be tired by the end of the day, but for now, I feel perfectly fine. I'm really happy with how, obviously, it has turned out. I'm really happy with how it looks. My helmet, I'm very happy with how it turned out, though. This is like a complete, you know, custom design that I'm very super into, because for a long time, I really wasn't sure what design I was going to go with. In terms of the movement on it, some of the dexterity isn't as much as I would have liked. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this, and again, this is still very much in the prototyping phase. It's not finished, still got to work on it. So there's a lot of like little tweaks that I'm going to be making about specifically how things fit, how things hold together. You know, there's a couple of parts that I'm actually waiting to arrive that I can actually change out that, you know, what I've currently got, right? So there's still a lot of little things that I want to change, and a lot of the data that I've gotten today wearing it and moving stuff around has also decided, you know what, I want to kind of tweak this and I want to change how that fits. But overall, how it fits on my body, how it feels to move around, fantastic. In terms of, like I said, the heat dispersion, it's been really cool today, and I have felt great. Like, I am barely working up a sweat, so I'm really happy about that as well. But I think that's kind of the roundup as it currently stands. Thank you guys for watching. I genuinely hope you enjoyed this very long project. This one has been in the works for a while, and I'm happy to finally get this particular episode out. And you'll probably see another episode in the armor, hopefully not too far in the future. Obviously, I don't know. I've got to film it first. But that's going to be all. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for supporting. I genuinely hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think. I'm very, very happy with it. I think it looks absolutely awesome. But I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. So as always, I'll see you next week in another episode. Have a good one.